Pleasure or Pain stands as the final cinematic statement from Zalman King, the master of erotic cinema, who gave the world Wild Orchid, Red Shoe Diaries, and helped shape 9.5 Weeks. Released in the fall of 2013, this film serves as both a culmination of King's artistic vision and a haunting farewell from a filmmaker who understood the delicate balance between desire and destruction better than perhaps anyone in Hollywood. The movie runs for 99 minutes of carefully crafted tension, featuring Malena Morgan in her most demanding dramatic role as Victoria, a young jewelry designer whose life becomes irrevocably changed when she encounters Jack, portrayed by Christos Vasilopoulos with a magnetic intensity that draws viewers into his web of seduction just as effectively as he ensnares his on-screen prey. The story begins in Santa Monica, where the Pacific Ocean meets the California coastline, in an endless dance of waves and foam that mirrors the push and pull of human desire. She works as a jewelry designer, crafting beautiful pieces that others will wear while she remains largely invisible behind her workbench, soldering precious metals and setting stones with the precision of someone who has found refuge in the controllable world of craftsmanship. Her apartment is modest, her social circle limited, her romantic life practically non-existent. She represents the everywoman, the person living a life of quiet resignation, who believes that dramatic passion exists only in movies and novels, never imagining that such intensity could crash into her carefully ordered existence like a tidal wave. The cinematography establishes this mundane reality through muted colors and natural lighting that makes Victoria's world feel both authentic and slightly melancholic. Director of photography Matthias Schubert captures the golden California light, filtering through windows, creating a dreamy quality that suggests something magical is always just beyond reach. The production design emphasizes the contrast between Victoria's simple lifestyle and the opulent world she will soon enter, with her modest jewelry studio serving as a symbol of her current limitations and unrealized potential. Jack's introduction comes like a sudden shift in atmospheric pressure, the kind of change that makes animals restless before a storm. He appears in Victoria's life with the casual confidence of someone who has never known rejection, never experienced doubt, never questioned whether he deserves exactly what he wants when he wants it. Christos Vasilopoulos brings to Jack a combination of European sophistication and predatory charm that makes him simultaneously irresistible and dangerous. His wardrobe speaks of wealth without ostentation. His manner suggests power held lightly but never forgotten. And his voice carries the kind of authority that makes people want to please him, even when they cannot quite explain why. Their first meeting occurs in an art gallery, a location that immediately establishes the themes of beauty, value, and possession that will dominate their relationship. Victoria is there to deliver some of her jewelry pieces to be displayed alongside local artwork, while Jack moves through the space like someone who owns everything he surveys. The gallery setting allows King to explore the idea that people, like art objects, can become possessions to be acquired, displayed, and ultimately controlled by those with sufficient resources and determination. The initial conversation between Victoria and Jack reveals King's skill at writing dialogue that operates on multiple levels simultaneously. Underneath, however, Jack is conducting a careful assessment of Victoria's psychology, identifying her vulnerabilities, mapping the emotional territory he will soon claim as his own. He compliments her work with the authority of someone whose opinion carries weight, but his praise comes with subtle suggestions for improvement, gentle criticisms disguised as helpful observations that begin the process of making Victoria doubt her own judgment, while becoming increasingly dependent on his approval. Malena Morgan brings remarkable depth to Victoria, avoiding the trap of playing her as either naive victim or willing participant. Instead, she creates a character who is simultaneously strong and vulnerable, independent yet yearning for connection, confident in her professional abilities but uncertain about her personal worth. Morgan's performance captures the way intelligent women can find themselves drawn into situations they would normally recognize as dangerous. Not through stupidity, but through the very human need for validation, and the intoxicating experience of being truly seen, by someone who seems to possess unlimited power to reshape reality according to his desire. The early scenes of their courtship reveal Jack's sophisticated understanding of seduction as a gradual process rather than a single decisive moment. He does not overwhelm Victoria with expensive gifts or dramatic gestures, but instead creates a series of small experiences that collectively reshape her understanding of what life can offer. A weekend trip to his beach house where she wakes up to find fresh flowers arranged in every room. A gallery opening where he introduces her to influential people who treat her with the respect typically reserved for established artists rather than struggling jewelry makers. The sophisticated social events demand cultural knowledge that Jack eagerly shares. The luxurious accommodations create new standards for comfort that make Victoria's modest apartment feel increasingly shabby by comparison. King understands that the most effective seduction involves not just offering someone new pleasures, but fundamentally altering their relationship to their existing life until return to their former circumstances. The sexual awakening that follows their emotional connection represents King's mastery of erotic cinema. Rather than simply presenting graphic encounters, he creates scenes that explore the psychological dimensions of physical intimacy. Jack introduces Victoria to experiences that push beyond her previous understanding of sexuality, but he does so with a patience and attentiveness that makes her feel cherished rather than exploited. The early intimate scenes glow with warmth and discovery, capturing the intoxicating experience of finding someone who seems to understand desires you did not even know you possessed. King's direction during these sequences emphasizes the emotional rather than merely physical aspects of their encounters. The camera captures Victoria's expressions of wonder and abandon. The way her body language changes from tentative exploration to confident sensuality, the gradual dissolution of inhibitions she had carried since childhood. The lighting becomes increasingly warm and golden, creating an almost dreamlike quality that suggests Victoria has entered a realm where normal rules no longer apply and previously unimaginable. The production design during this phase reflects Victoria's expanding world through increasingly luxurious locations. Jack's beach house features floor-to-ceiling windows that frame the ocean like a living painting. His city apartment occupies an entire floor of a building that offers panoramic views of Los Angeles, stretching from the mountains to the sea. Private dining rooms and exclusive restaurants provide intimate spaces where conversation. Each location seems designed specifically for the kinds of encounters Jack orchestrates, raising questions about how many other women have experienced similar journeys through these same carefully curated environments. The supporting characters during this phase serve primarily to reinforce the fantasy that Jack is creating for Victoria. Restaurant staff treat them with the deference reserved for celebrities. Hotel employees anticipate their every need before. Gallery owners and art collectors seek Jack's opinion and compete for his attention. Everyone in Jack's orbit seems to exist primarily to validate his importance and, by extension, Victoria's special status as the woman who has captured his interest. This creates an artificial environment where Victoria's growing dependence on Jack feels natural and even inevitable rather than manufactured and potentially dangerous. The psychological transformation that Victoria undergoes during this period represents one of the film's most sophisticated elements. Morgan's performance captures the way someone can gradually lose touch with their former self while believing they are becoming their truest self. Victoria begins to see her previous life as a kind of prison from which Jack has liberated her. Her modest apartment, her simple routines, her limited social circle all seem like evidence of a kind of death in life that she was too afraid or too unimaginative to escape on her own. King's script explores how this transformation affects Victoria's other relationships. Her friendship with Isabel, played by Kayla Jane, becomes strained as Victoria increasingly prioritizes her time with. Isabel serves as the voice of concern and reason, questioning Victoria's growing isolation from her former support network and expressing worry about the rapid changes in her personality and priorities. These scenes provide important counterpoint to the intoxicating romance by showing how Jack's influence extends far beyond his direct interactions with Victoria. The film's exploration of power dynamics becomes increasingly complex as Victoria's initial gratitude and excitement begin to mix with something approaching worship. Jack's ability to create extraordinary experiences for her starts to feel less like generosity and more like a demonstration of powers that she could never hope to match or fully understand. She begins to measure her own worth primarily through his attention and approval, creating a psychological dependency that makes independent decision-making increasingly difficult. The middle section of the film marks the beginning of Jack's more explicit attempts to push Victoria beyond her comfort zone. The requests that once felt like invitations to explore new dimensions of pleasure begin to carry undertones of expectation and subtle coercion. Jack's patience with Victoria's hesitations grows shorter, and his reassurances about her safety become more focused on achieving compliance than addressing her genuine concerns. The golden lighting of the earlier scenes begins to take on a more artificial quality, suggesting that the paradise Jack created was always more constructed than organic. King's direction during this transition period demonstrates his understanding of how abusive relationships develop through gradual boundary violations, rather than sudden dramatic changes. Jack does not transform overnight from charming suitor to demanding controller. Instead, each new request represents only a small step beyond what Victoria has already accepted, making resistance seem unreasonable or ungrateful. The script captures how someone can find themselves in a situation they never intended to enter through a series of individually rational decisions that collectively lead to an irrational destination. The supporting cast during this phase includes Elle Alexandra as Rita, a woman from Jack's past, who serves as both a warning and a template for Victoria's potential future. Rita has clearly traveled the same path that Victoria is now walking, and her interaction with Victoria carries the weight of someone who recognizes the signs of a familiar tragedy unfolding. Alexandra brings to Rita a combination of worldly sophistication and underlying damage that suggests the ultimate cost of Jack's kind of attention. Daniel Sobure appears as Antonio, one of Jack's associates who helps facilitate the increasingly elaborate scenarios that Jack designs for Victoria's education. Sobure plays Antonio as a man who has become comfortable with moral compromises, someone who has learned not to ask too many questions about Jack's methods or motivations as long as his own position remains secure. Antonio represents the network of enablers that allows men like Jack to operate with impunity, creating the infrastructure necessary for psychological manipulation on this scale. The film's exploration of Victoria's psychology during this period reveals King's sophisticated understanding of how intelligent people can rationalize their participation in their own exploitation. Victoria tells herself that her discomfort is simply evidence of her own limitations, that her reluctance to embrace new experiences reflects internalized shame rather than legitimate concerns about her safety or dignity. She begins to see her previous boundaries not as healthy self-protection, but as neurotic inhibitions that prevent her from achieving her full potential as a woman and as Jack's partner. The cinematography during this phase reflects Victoria's changing relationship to her own experience. The camera begins to adopt positions that make Victoria appear smaller and more vulnerable within the frame, often showing her from above, or at angles that emphasize her isolation, even when surrounded by luxury. The lighting becomes more dramatic and less natural, with harsh shadows that suggest the growing darkness at the edges of her new life. The color palette shifts from the warm golds of the early romance to cooler blues and grays that create a sense of emotional distance and growing unease. The production design evolution mirrors Victoria's psychological journey through increasingly sterile and intimidating environments. Jack's properties begin to feel more like stages set for specific performances rather than spaces designed for human comfort and connection. The art on the walls becomes more abstract and challenging rather than beautiful and soothing. Every element of the physical environment seems calculated to reinforce specific power dynamics rather than simply provide an attractive backdrop for romance. King's script during this section reveals his understanding of how sexual coercion operates through the manipulation of consent rather than its complete absence. Jack continues to ask for Victoria's agreement to his requests, but the context in which these requests are made becomes increasingly coercive. Victoria's dependence on Jack for her new lifestyle, her isolation from previous sources of support, and her growing identity as his chosen partner all combine to make genuine refusal practically impossible, even when it remains theoretically available. The film's exploration of Victoria's internal monologue during this period captures the way victims of psychological manipulation often become their own worst enemies. She criticizes herself for being uptight when she feels uncomfortable with Jack's requests. She interprets her own emotional responses as evidence of immaturity rather than wisdom. She begins to treat her instincts for self-preservation as character flaws that need to be overcome rather than important signals that deserve serious attention and respect. The supporting characters during this phase increasingly serve to reinforce Victoria's isolation rather than provide genuine connection. The people in Jack's world treat her with a combination of deference and distance that makes her feel simultaneously special and completely alien. No one seems interested in forming a genuine relationship with her apart from her connection to Jack, which reinforces the message that her primary value lies in her ability to please him rather than in her own inherent worth as a person. The dialogue during this section reveals King's skill at capturing the way language can be used as a tool of control. Jack's requests become increasingly framed as expressions of love rather than demands for compliance. He begins to suggest that Victoria's willingness to trust him completely represents the ultimate expression of their romantic connection, making refusal seem like a betrayal of their relationship rather than a reasonable exercise of personal autonomy. The script shows how someone can be manipulated into participating in their own exploitation by being convinced that resistance represents a failure of love rather than an act of self-protection. The film's middle act culminates in a series of encounters that push Victoria beyond her previous understanding of her own limits. King handles these scenes with a combination of explicit content and psychological insight. The focus remains on Victoria's internal experience, rather than simply the physical activities involved, capturing her growing sense of disconnection from her own body and emotions, as she struggles to maintain her identity while accommodating Jack's increasingly demanding expectations. The psychological complexity of this section lies in its refusal to present Victoria as simply a passive Victoria, as simply a passive victim, or Jack as a straightforward bully. Victoria continues to make choices, even if those choices occur within a context that severely limits her options. Jack continues to express what appears to be genuine care for Victoria, even as his actions demonstrate a fundamental disregard for her autonomy and well-being. King avoids the easy answers that would make their relationship simply a matter of good versus evil, instead exploring the much more disturbing territory of how people can genuinely care for each other while simultaneously engaging in profoundly destructive behavior. The woman who once took pride in her independence and creative autonomy finds herself unable to make simple decisions without seeking Jack's approval. The artist who once created jewelry that expressed her own aesthetic vision now finds herself questioning her own taste and instincts about everything from clothing to food to music. The person who once enjoyed solitude now feels anxious and incomplete whenever she is not in Jack's presence or actively engaged in activities designed to please him. King's direction during Victoria's awakening emphasizes the horror of self-recognition rather than external threat. The most frightening moments come not when Jack becomes overtly threatening, but when Victoria catches glimpses of herself in mirrors and windows and struggles to recognize the person looking back at her. The camera captures these moments of recognition through subtle changes in Morgan's expression. The way her face shifts from confusion to horror as she realizes how completely she has been transformed. The cinematography during Victoria's growing awareness employs increasingly fragmented visual techniques that mirror her psychological state. Reflections become more prominent, showing Victoria multiple versions of herself that seem to belong to different people. The camera begins to move more erratically, creating a sense of instability and disorientation that matches Victoria's growing understanding that the life she has been living may not be as real or as desirable as she had convinced herself it was. The supporting characters during this phase begin to serve different functions in the narrative. Isabel's earlier warnings take on new significance as Victoria begins to understand what her friend was trying to tell her. Rita's damaged sophistication becomes a preview of Victoria's potential future rather than an enviable model of worldly experience. Antonio's casual complicity in Jack's manipulations transforms from helpful facilitation to active participation in psychological abuse. The production design during Victoria's awakening reflects her changing perception of Jack's world. The luxurious environments that once seemed like paradise begin to reveal their underlying artificiality and hostility. The expensive furniture appears less welcoming, and more like props in an elaborate performance. The beautiful art begins to seem cold and calculating, rather than inspiring. The panoramic views from Jack's windows start to feel like barriers that separate Victoria from the real world, rather than evidence of Jack's elevated status within it. King's script explores how difficult it can be for someone to acknowledge that they have been systematically manipulated, especially when that manipulation has been carried out by someone they love and who appears to love them in return. Victoria's growing awareness of her situation conflicts with her emotional investment in the relationship and her practical dependence on Jack for her current lifestyle. The film captures the way victims of psychological abuse often know intellectually that something is wrong long before they can emotionally accept that reality and take action to protect themselves. The dialogue during this section reveals how Jack responds to Victoria's growing resistance. He becomes more affectionate when she pulls away, more generous when she expresses dissatisfaction, more attentive when she begins to question their dynamic. His responses are perfectly calibrated to reinforce Victoria's dependence while making her feel guilty for doubting someone who appears to care so deeply about her happiness and well-being. The film's exploration of Victoria's attempts to reclaim her autonomy demonstrates King's understanding of how difficult it can be to escape from psychologically abusive relationships. Victoria's first attempts at independence are tentative and easily discouraged. She tries to reconnect with her old friends, but finds that the gap between her current life and her previous existence has become too wide to bridge easily. She attempts to return to her jewelry making but discovers that her creative instincts have been so thoroughly colonized by Jack's preferences that she can no longer distinguish between her own aesthetic sense and his influence on her taste. The supporting cast during Victoria's struggle for independence includes characters who represent different possible paths forward. Some, like Isabel, offer unconditional support and practical assistance with escaping Jack's influence. Others, like Rita, serve as warnings about what happens to women who become too thoroughly absorbed into Jack's world to ever fully escape its influence. King's direction during Victoria's escape employs visual techniques that emphasize the difficulty of breaking free from established patterns of behavior and thought. The editing creates a sense of psychological momentum that is constantly being interrupted, reflecting the way breaking free from abusive relationships requires sustained effort over time, rather than a single decisive action. The cinematography during this section uses lighting to reflect Victoria's emotional state and growing determination. The artificial golden glow that characterized her early time with Jack gives way to harsher, more natural lighting that makes everything appear more real, but also more challenging. The color palette shifts toward cooler tones that suggest clarity and determination, while also creating a sense of isolation and uncertainty about what lies beyond Jack's carefully constructed world. The film's climactic section explores the psychological and sometimes physical violence that often emerges when someone like Jack realizes that their control over their victim is slipping away. Jack's response to Victoria's growing independence reveals the anger and desperation that his sophisticated charm was always designed to conceal. The man who once seemed capable of creating any experience Victoria could desire now appears focused primarily on preventing her from imagining any experience that does not include him in a central role. King's handling of this escalation demonstrates his commitment to psychological realism over simple thriller mechanics. Jack does not transform into a cartoon villain or resort to crude physical intimidation. Instead, he employs increasingly sophisticated emotional manipulation designed to convince Victoria that her desire for independence represents not healthy self-assertion, but dangerous self-destruction. He presents himself as her protector against a world that will inevitably disappoint and exploit her, while simultaneously making it clear that his protection comes with conditions that amount to complete psychological surrender. The dialogue during the climactic confrontations reveals the underlying philosophy that has driven Jack's behavior throughout the film. He genuinely believes that he understands Victoria better than she understands herself, that his desires for her represent a more sophisticated and ultimately more satisfying vision of her potential than anything she could develop independently. His manipulation is not simply selfish gratification, but reflects a sincere conviction that Victoria needs his guidance to achieve her full potential as a woman and as a human being. Victoria's final escape from Jack's influence represents one of the most psychologically complex climaxes in King's filmography. Her freedom is not simply a matter of physical departure, but requires a fundamental reconstruction of her sense of self and her understanding of her own desires and capabilities. The film shows how someone who has been systematically manipulated must not only escape their abuser but also overcome the internal voice that contentions. The supporting characters during the climactic section serve to illustrate the network of relationships that must be rebuilt when someone escapes from an abusive situation. Isabel's continued friendship provides a bridge back to Victoria's previous life, but that bridge requires careful reconstruction rather than simple resumption. Rita's fate serves as a warning about the long-term consequences of remaining trapped. Antonio's complicity becomes a source of evidence that helps Victoria understand the systematic nature of what was done to her. King's direction during the resolution emphasizes the ongoing nature of recovery from psychological manipulation, rather than suggesting that escape represents a simple return to previous circumstances. Victoria's freedom is real but fragile, requiring constant vigilance and conscious effort to maintain. The camera work becomes more stable and grounded as Victoria reconnects with her own instincts and capabilities, but subtle visual cues suggest that the process of healing will be lengthy and sometimes difficult. The cinematography during the resolution employs natural lighting and realistic color palettes that create a sense of authenticity and hope, while avoiding the artificial perfection of Victoria's time with Jack. The visual style suggests that reality, while sometimes less glamorous than fantasy, offers the possibility of genuine satisfaction and sustainable happiness that manipulation and control can never provide. The film's exploration of Victoria's reconstruction of her identity after escaping Jack's influence demonstrates King's sophisticated understanding of trauma recovery. Victoria must not only reject Jack's vision of who she should be, but also rediscover who she actually is beneath the layers of manipulation and coercion she has experienced. This process requires her to distinguish between desires that are authentically her own and those that were implanted or shaped by Jack's systematic influence over her thoughts and feelings. The dialogue during the resolution reveals how Victoria's voice changes as she reclaims her autonomy. Her speech patterns become less formal and affected, more direct and authentic. She begins to express opinions and preferences without immediately second-guessing herself or seeking external validation. The script captures the way someone sounds different when they are speaking from their own center, rather than trying to please someone else or live up to external expectations. The production design during the resolution creates environments that support Victoria's healing while avoiding both the artificial luxury of Jack's world and the deliberate modesty of her previous existence. Her new spaces reflect her growing understanding of her own taste and needs, rather than either economic limitation or someone else's vision of appropriate luxury. The settings suggest that Victoria is learning to create a life that is both beautiful and authentic, sophisticated and sustainable. The film's final act includes a series of encounters that test Victoria's commitment to her independence and her ability to recognize and resist manipulation in its various forms. These encounters serve both as evidence of her growth and as reminders that the skills Jack taught her about reading people and situations can be used for self-protection, rather than simply accommodation to others' desires. King's script explores how Victoria's experience with Jack, while traumatic, has also provided her with insights into human psychology and power dynamics that she can use to protect herself and potentially help other women who find themselves in similar situations. The film suggests that recovery from abuse can involve not just returning to a previous state of innocence, but developing a more sophisticated understanding of human nature that includes both its capacity for manipulation and its potential for genuine connection and mutual respect. The supporting cast during the final act represents the network of authentic relationships that Victoria builds to replace the artificial connections that characterize. These relationships are based on mutual respect and genuine interest rather than power dynamics and psychological manipulation. The contrast with Jack's world illustrates the difference between relationships that enhance someone's autonomy and those that systematically undermine it. The film's conclusion avoids both the fairy tale resolution of complete healing and the nihilistic suggestion that recovery is impossible. Instead, King presents Victoria's ongoing journey toward psychological health as a realistic process that involves setbacks and victories, moments of clarity and periods of confusion, progress that sometimes feels rapid and other times seems imperceptibly slow. The final scenes employ a documentary-style approach that breaks the fourth wall as Victoria addresses the camera directly, sharing her story as a warning and a source of hope for other women who might find themselves in similar situations. This technique, which recalls some of King's earlier work, creates a sense of authenticity and immediacy that reinforces the film's serious intentions despite its exploitation cinema elements. Morgan's performance during these final moments captures Victoria's hard-won wisdom without suggesting that her experience with Jack was somehow necessary for her personal growth. She has learned important lessons about herself and about human nature, but the film makes clear that these lessons came at a tremendous cost that no one should have to pay for the sake of education or personal development. The cinematography during the direct address sequences uses natural lighting and simple camera setups that create intimacy between Victoria and the audience, while emphasizing the reality of her experience rather than its dramatic or entertainment value. The visual style suggests that Victoria's story, while compelling as cinema, represents a real danger that exists in the world beyond the movie theater. King's direction during these final moments demonstrates his understanding that exploitation cinema can serve purposes beyond simple titillation or escapist entertainment. By having Victoria speak directly to the audience about her experience, he transforms what could have been simply a cautionary tale into a form of education, using the conventions of erotic thriller cinema to deliver a message about recognizing and resisting psychological manipulation. The film's ultimate message emerges through the accumulation of psychological details rather than explicit statement. Pleasure or pain suggests that genuine intimacy requires mutual respect for autonomy, that authentic sexuality cannot be separated from authentic consent, and that relationships based on power imbalances ultimately serve neither party's real interests, no matter how sophisticated or seductive they might appear on the surface. The technical aspects of the production serve to reinforce these thematic concerns throughout the film. Matthias Schubert's cinematography creates visual metaphors for psychological states without becoming heavy-handed or obvious. The lighting design reflects emotional realities while maintaining the glossy aesthetic that King's audience expect. The production design creates environments that feel both luxurious and ultimately hollow, beautiful and somehow threatening, seductive and ultimately unsatisfying. Andy Bauer's musical score avoids the obvious choices of either romantic themes or thriller music, instead creating atmospheric soundscapes that support the film's psychological realism while enhancing its erotic elements. Music becomes more discordant and unsettling as Victoria's situation becomes more dangerous, but the changes are subtle enough that they register subconsciously rather than announcing themselves as obvious dramatic cues. The editing by King himself maintains pacing that allows the psychological elements of the story to develop gradually while providing enough plot momentum to hold audience attention. The film avoids the common mistake of either rushing through the seduction process or dwelling so extensively on psychological development that the narrative loses forward movement. The balance between character development and plot advancement reflects King's years of experience in creating films that serve multiple purposes simultaneously. The costume design creates visual representations of Victoria's psychological journey through her wardrobe evolution from practical work clothes to increasingly elaborate and revealing outfits mirrors her growing dependence on external validation and her diminishing connection to her own authentic preferences. The reversal of this trend during her recovery provides visual evidence of her returning autonomy without requiring explicit dialogue or exposition. The film's exploration of contemporary themes reflects King's awareness that the dynamics he was examining in 2013 had particular relevance to an era increasingly dominated by social media, celebrity culture, and economic inequality. Victoria's initial attraction to Jack's world reflects broader cultural messages about the desirability of wealth, luxury, and access to exclusive experiences. Her gradual recognition of the costs associated with these apparent benefits serves as commentary on cultural values that prioritize material success over psychological health and authentic self-expression. The adult film industry background of several cast members adds layers of meaning to the film's exploration of sexuality, power, and authenticity. King's decision to cast performers like Morgan, Alexandra, and Hawkins creates an interesting tension between their professional experience with performing sexuality and their characters' supposedly naive encounters with sexual manipulation. This casting choice raises questions about the relationship between performed and authentic sexuality that add complexity to the film's examination of consent and coercion. The film's production history as King's final work before his death from cancer adds poignancy to its themes of control, loss, and the struggle to maintain dignity in the face of overwhelming forces. While not autobiographical in any literal sense, Pleasure or Pain can be read as a meditation on vulnerability and power that reflects its creator's awareness of his own mortality and his desire to leave behind a work that addressed serious themes through the medium he knew best. The critical reception of Pleasure or Pain reflects the ongoing tension between King's serious artistic intentions and the exploitation cinema context within which his work was inevitably received. Reviewers struggled to evaluate a film that combined genuine psychological insight with explicit sexual content, sophisticated cinematography with adult film industry casting, and serious themes about abuse and recovery with the conventions of erotic thriller entertainment. The film's legacy within King's filmography represents both a culmination of his career-long interests and a departure from some of his earlier approaches to similar material. While movies like Wild Orchid and Red Shoe Diaries maintained some ambiguity about whether their male characters were ultimately beneficial or harmful to their female protagonists, Pleasure or Pain takes a clearer position that psychological manipulation represents abuse, regardless of how sophisticated or seductive its presentation might be. Victoria's final monologue serves as both conclusion to her individual story and commentary on the broader social conditions that make stories like hers possible. She speaks about the cultural messages that encourage women to value external validation over internal wisdom, to seek completion through romantic relationships rather than personal development, and to interpret their own discomfort as evidence of limitation rather than important influence. The film's ending avoids the temptation to provide easy answers or simple solutions to the complex problems it has examined. Victoria's recovery is ongoing rather than complete. Her understanding of her experience continues to evolve, and her ability to help other women facing similar situations remains limited by the systemic nature of the problems she has encountered. King's refusal to provide false comfort or unrealistic resolution demonstrates his commitment to honesty about the difficulties involved in recovering from psychological manipulation. The technical achievement of Pleasure or Pain lies not just in its individual elements, but in the way those elements combine to create a coherent artistic statement about serious themes using the conventions of commercial entertainment cinema. King's direction maintains the glossy production values and erotic content that his audience expected while using those elements to support a genuinely critical examination of the power dynamics that make such content possible and potentially problematic. The performance requirements for the cast, particularly Morgan in the lead role, demanded a combination of dramatic acting ability and comfort with explicit content that few actors possess. Morgan's success in creating a character who remains sympathetic and relatable despite making choices that audiences might find frustrating or incomprehensible represents a significant achievement in a role that could easily have become either one-dimensional victim or unsympathetic participant in her own exploitation. The film's exploration of male psychology through Jack's character avoids the simple villain portrayal that would have been easier but less. Vasilopoulos creates a character who genuinely believes in his own benevolence while systematically destroying someone else's autonomy. This psychological complexity makes Jack more disturbing than a simple sociopath would have been, because his behavior emerges from attitudes and assumptions that exist throughout mainstream culture, rather than representing pure aberration. The supporting cast's contribution to the film's success lies in their ability to create believable characters who inhabit Jack's world without becoming simple enablers or innocent bystanders. Each character represents a different response to the moral compromises that Jack's lifestyle requires from everyone in his orbit, from Isabel's clear-eyed resistance to Antonio's comfortable complicity to read as damaged. The film's examination of recovery from psychological manipulation provides insights that extend beyond the specific context of romantic relationships to include family dynamics, workplace situations, and other contexts where power imbalances can create conditions for abuse. Victoria's struggle to distinguish between her authentic desires and those that have been shaped by manipulation offers a template for anyone who has found themselves questioning the authenticity of their own thoughts and feelings after exposure to systematic influence. King's artistic vision in Pleasure or Pain represents a mature statement from a filmmaker who spent his career exploring the intersection between sexuality and psychology, between desire and danger, between the human need for connection and the various ways that need can be exploited by those who understand it better than their victims do. The film serves as both entertainment and education, providing viewers with both the satisfactions of erotic thriller cinema and genuine insight into the psychological dynamics that make such entertainment both appealing and potentially problematic. The lasting impact of Pleasure or Pain lies in its demonstration that exploitation cinema can address serious themes without abandoning the genre elements that define King's success in creating a film that works simultaneously as erotic thriller and a psychological study suggests possibilities for commercial cinema that remain largely unexplored. The film proves that audiences can appreciate both sophisticated character development and explicit content, both serious themes and entertainment value, both psychological realism and commercial appeal. Victoria's journey from independence through manipulation to hard-won wisdom represents not just individual character development, but a broader commentary on the social conditions that make such journeys necessary. Her story serves as both warning and inspiration, demonstrating both the reality of psychological manipulation and the possibility of recovery. The film's conclusion suggests that, while the forces that enabled Jack's behavior continue to exist in society, individual awareness and resistance remain both possible and necessary. The technical and artistic achievement of Pleasure or Pain establishes it as a significant work within both King's filmography and the broader context of erotic cinema. Its combination of sophisticated production values, strong performances, and serious thematic content demonstrates the potential for genre cinema to address complex social and psychological issues without sacrificing commercial appeal or entertainment value. The film stands as evidence that thoughtful filmmakers can use any genre conventions to explore serious themes and provide genuine insights into human nature and contemporary. As King's final directorial statement, Pleasure or Pain represents both a culmination of his career-long interests and a mature artistic vision that acknowledges both the pleasures and dangers inherent in the kind of cinema he created. The film serves as his farewell to audiences who appreciated his unique contribution to American cinema and his final argument for the serious artistic potential of erotic entertainment when created by filmmakers who understand both its appeal and its responsibilities. The geographical authenticity of Pleasure or Pain emerges through its strategic use of Southern California locations that reflect both the aspirational lifestyle, Jack, Victoria. The decision to film across Malibu, Santa Monica, and Westlake Village creates a visual journey that mirrors Victoria's emotional arc, moving from the accessible middle-class environments of Santa Monica to the exclusive enclaves of Malibu that represent Jack's world of privilege and control. IT Web 1. The production schedule spanning from September through November of 2011 allowed the filmmakers to capture the golden light of California autumn, creating the warm visual palette that initially makes Jack's world appear so seductive. Web 35 Santa Monica. Santa Monica serves as the perfect setting for Victoria's initial existence, representing the space where ordinary people live extraordinary dreams. While the city's famous pier, with its century-long history as a symbol of American leisure and possibility, provides an iconic backdrop that suggests Victoria's life contains potential for adventure and transformation, even before Jack arrives to exploit that potential. Web 38. The production team's choice to showcase Santa Monica's blend of accessibility and glamour reflects the film's central theme about the thin line between healthy aspiration and dangerous fantasy. Malibu's exclusive beaches and private estates serve as the primary location for Jack's manipulation of Victoria, with the isolated luxury of the area providing both stunning visuals and psychological metaphors for the beautiful prison Jack constructs around his targets. The production design takes full advantage of Malibu's reputation as a playground for the wealthy and powerful, using its natural beauty and architectural sophistication to make Jack's control appear desirable, rather than threatening. The planned community's careful organization and middle-class respectability serve as a visual reminder of the life Victoria is leaving behind, creating poignant contrast with the unstructured luxury of Jack's environments. The production team uses Westlake Village to represent the kind of life that most people would consider successful and satisfying, making Victoria's rejection of such normalcy seem both understandable. King's cinematographic philosophy, developed through decades of creating erotic cinema, emphasizes the importance of environment in creating authentic sensuality rather than mere titillation. Webb, 39. His collaboration with Stanley Kubrick on the visual approach to sexuality in cinema demonstrates the respect his work commanded among serious filmmakers, despite its commercial exploitation context. Webb, 39. The conversations between King and Kubrick about filming women and approaching erotica cinematically reveal King's sophisticated understanding of the relationship between visual beauty and emotional authenticity in creating compelling erotic content. The production's attention to lifestyle and set design reflects King's belief that eroticism emerges from the total sensory environment rather than simply physical encounters. Webb, 42. His philosophy that seduction requires careful attention to every visual element, from lighting to furniture to color palette, shapes every aspect of pleasure or pain's production design. The film's success in making Jack's world appear genuinely seductive rather than obviously manipulative demonstrates King's mastery of the visual language of desire and his understanding of how environment shapes psychological response. Malena Morgan's casting represents a calculated decision to bridge the gap between adult entertainment and mainstream dramatic performance. Chukti. Morgan's physical presence, described as tall and striking with distinctive blue eyes, creates visual contrast with the more conventional beauty typically associated with manipulation victims in erotic thrillers. The actress's personal background, including her modeling school education and her transition from mainstream employment to adult entertainment, parallels some elements of Victoria's character arc. Webb. Morgan's experience working at Cracker Barrel before entering the adult industry provides her with understanding of the economic pressures that make Jack's world appear attractive to someone from a working-class background. Webb. 45. Her Florida upbringing and move to Los Angeles to pursue career opportunities mirrors the geographical displacement that often accompanies psychological manipulation. Morgan's professional recognition within the adult industry, including her selection as Penthouse Pet of the Month, demonstrates the level of success she achieved before transitioning to dramatic roles. Webb. 45i. This professional achievement provides her with confidence and authority that translates into Victoria's character, making her appear genuinely accomplished rather than simply vulnerable. The actress's interests in photography, hiking, acting, and rock climbing suggests someone with diverse capabilities and strong sense of personal identity, qualities that make Victoria's gradual loss of autonomy more tragic and believable. The film's exploration of the adult entertainment industry context adds layers of meaning to its examination of consent and coercion. Webb. 40. Morgan's professional experience with performing sexuality under direction provides meta-commentary on the relationship between performance and authenticity that runs throughout the film. Her ability to distinguish between professional sexual performance and personal sexual experience allows her to create a character who genuinely struggles with questions of authentic desire versus learned response. King's directing philosophy regarding actor comfort and clear communication about expectations reflects his professional understanding of the ethical issues involved in filming explicit content. Webb. 42. His practice of writing specific descriptions of intended nudity and sexuality, combined with his refusal to seduce actors into performing beyond their comfort level, demonstrates responsible approach to exploitation cinema. This ethical framework provides important context for understanding how pleasure or pain addresses themes of consent and manipulation. The film's production companies, including the Zalman King Company and Visual Arts Entertainment, represent established entities within the erotic entertainment industry with track records of creating commercially successful content. Their involvement provides the financial resources necessary for high production values, while maintaining the specialized knowledge required for creating effective erotic cinema. The partnership between mainstream and specialized production entities reflects the film's ambition to bridge commercial and artistic objectives. The international distribution of Pleasure or Pain under various titles, including Wilds for Langen in Germany and Kamikaze Love in some markets, demonstrates the global appeal of King's brand of sophisticated erotic cinema. Web 36. The various international titles reflect different cultural approaches to marketing erotic content, with some emphasizing the psychological aspects while others focus on the romantic elements. This international reach provides evidence of the universal themes the film addresses, despite its specifically American cultural context. The film's production timeline, extending from August through March, allowed for careful post-production work that contributes significantly to its polished final form on Web 35. King's personal involvement in editing, combined with the extended production schedule, provided opportunities for refining the psychological nuances that distinguish the film. The careful attention to post-production reflects King's understanding that erotic cinema requires precise pacing and careful attention to emotional rhythm to achieve genuine impact rather than simple titillation. The cinematography captures the specific qualities of Southern California light that have made the region central to American film production since its earliest days. Web 35. The golden hour lighting that characterizes many of the film's key scenes reflects both the natural beauty of the locations and the artificial enhancement that characterizes Jack's presentation of reality to Victoria. The contrast between natural and artificial lighting throughout the film provides visual metaphor for the difference between authentic and manufactured experience. The film's technical crew, including director of photography Matthias Schubert, brings professional expertise from mainstream film production to the specialized requirements of erotic cinema. Schubert's ability to create visually stunning images that serve the film's serious themes while maintaining commercial appeal demonstrates the high level of craftsmanship that King demanded from his collaborators. The cinematographer's work creates visual poetry that elevates the material beyond simple commercial exploitation. The production design team's creation of environments that feel both luxurious and somehow threatening requires sophisticated understanding of how physical spaces affect psychological states. The careful selection and modification of locations to serve the film's thematic purposes demonstrates professional attention to detail that supports rather than distracts from the performance. Every visual element, from furniture selection to color coordination, contributes to the overall effect of seductive beauty that conceals underlying danger. The costume design reflects Victoria's psychological journey through her changing relationship to clothing and self-presentation. Her wardrobe evolution from practical professional attire to increasingly revealing and expensive outfits. The reversal of this trend during her recovery provides equally clear visual evidence of her returning autonomy and authentic self-expression. The sound design and musical score create atmospheric support for the psychological drama without overwhelming the intimate scale of the character interactions. The audio elements enhance the sensual qualities of key scenes, while providing subtle emotional. The restraint shown in avoiding obvious musical cues or heavy-handed sound effects demonstrates professional understanding of how audio can support rather than manipulate viewer response. The film's exploration of wealth and power dynamics reflects broader American cultural tensions about economic inequality and social mobility that became increasingly prominent during the early 2010s. Victoria's attraction to Jack's lifestyle speaks to cultural messages of success and happiness. The film's critique of these cultural values operates through dramatic demonstration rather than explicit political commentary. The adult film industry casting choices create interesting tensions between the performer's professional experience with sexuality and their characters' supposed innocence or naivety. This casting strategy adds complexity to the film's examination of performed versus authentic sexuality, making viewers question assumptions about. The metatextual elements created by this casting approach provide additional layers of meaning for sophisticated viewers. The film's production during the final period of King's career represents both culmination of his artistic development and reflection on the evolution of erotic cinema in the digital age. The changing landscape of adult entertainment, with increasing internet distribution and changing consumer expectations, provides important context for understanding the film as potentially representing the end of an era in sophisticated erotic filmmaking. The international success of the film demonstrates the universal appeal of stories about psychological manipulation and recovery, despite their specific cultural context. The translation of the film's themes across different cultural and linguistic boundaries suggests that the dynamics it explores transcend national differences in sexual attitudes and relationship expectations. This universal relevance provides evidence for the film's artistic merit beyond its commercial exploitation elements. King's legacy as a filmmaker who elevated erotic cinema through serious attention to character development, visual beauty, and thematic complexity provides important context for evaluating pleasure or pain within film history. His influence on subsequent filmmakers working in similar genres demonstrates the lasting impact of his artistic vision and professional approach. The film serves as fitting conclusion to a career dedicated to proving that exploitation cinema could achieve genuine artistic merit without sacrificing commercial appeal. The regional California culture, reflected in the film's locations and character dynamics, provides specific cultural context that makes the story feel authentic rather than generic. The particular blend of ambition, materialism, and spiritual searching that characterizes Southern California provides perfect backdrop for examining how people can lose themselves in pursuit of lifestyle enhancement. The film's understanding of this regional culture adds depth to its psychological insights. Victoria's journey from modest jewelry designer to sophisticated victim, and finally to self-aware survivor reflects broader American narratives of a reinvent. Her story resonates with cultural themes about the promises and dangers of transformation that run throughout American literature and cinema. The film's engagement with these archetypal themes provides additional resonance beyond its specific plot elements. The technical achievement of creating a film that works simultaneously as exploitation entertainment and serious psychological drama demonstrates the possibility for commercial cinema to out-abandoning audience. This balance between commercial and artistic objectives provides a model for other filmmakers interested in elevating genre material through professional craftsmanship and thematic seriousness. The film's success in achieving this balance validates King's career-long commitment to treating erotic subjects with artistic respect. The serendipitous casting of Christos Vasilopoulos as Jack represents one of the most fascinating behind-the-scenes elements of Pleasure or Pain's production history. Originally arriving to audition for a minor supporting role, Vasilopoulos so impressed Zalman King during the casting process that the director immediately reimagined the lead character specifically for the Greek actor. This spontaneous decision would prove prophetic, as the film ultimately became King's final directorial work, making Vasilopoulos the last actor to be personally chosen by the legendary filmmaker for a starring role. Vasilopoulos brought extraordinary depth to his preparation for the role, drawing from his extensive theatrical background in Greece, where he began performing at 17 and graduated from the prestigious. His 4 years as a member of the National Theatre of Greece provided him with classical training that informed his approach to Jack's psychological complexity, allowing him to create a character who operates on multiple levels simultaneously. The actor's ability to speak 5 languages fluently added international sophistication to Jack's character, making his worldly charm feel authentic rather than manufactured. The physical preparation Vasilopoulos undertook for the role reflects his commitment to embodying Jack's predatory confidence and underlying violence. His 3rd-degree black belt in Taekwondo and brown belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu provided him with the controlled physical presence that makes Jack simultaneously attractive and threatening. His military service in the Greek Special Forces as a Marine, where he achieved the rank of sergeant, informed his understanding of power dynamics and psychological control that becomes central to Jack's manipulation of Victoria. The actor's previous experience in Greek television, including his role as a series regular on one of Greece's most popular daily dramas, provided him with understanding of sustained character development across This experience proved valuable in creating Jack's long-term psychological manipulation of Victoria, allowing Vasilopoulos to maintain consistency in the character's motivations while revealing new layers of complexity throughout the film's runtime. His 14 years of success in Greek theater and television, before transitioning to American productions, demonstrated the professional commitment necessary for such a demanding role. Vasilopoulos' subsequent American television work, including recurring roles in critically acclaimed series like Banshee and The Last Ship, validates King's intuitive casting decision. His ability to portray characters with moral complexity, from the conflicted Oleg in Banshee to the strategically minded Stavros Diomedes in The Last Ship, demonstrates the range that makes his portrayal of Jack particularly unsettling. These later roles show an actor comfortable with exploring the gray areas of human nature that make manipulation possible. The tragic timing of King's death from colon cancer in February 2012, just months after completing principal photography on Pleasure or Pain, adds poignant significance to every creative decision in the film. King had battled cancer for 6 years while continuing to work, demonstrating the same determination that characterized his entire career. The knowledge that he was creating his final film while fighting a terminal illness infuses every scene with additional weight and urgency. King's son-in-law Alison Burnett's description of the filmmaker as more complex and humane than those who knew him only from afar could imagine provides important context for understanding Pleasure or Pain's nuanced approach to its difficult subject matter. The film's refusal to present simple moral judgments reflects King's sophisticated understanding of human psychology, developed over decades of exploring the intersections between desire, power, and vulnerability. His reputation among colleagues as an extraordinary artist and complex human being helps explain the film's ability to find humanity in even its most problematic characters. The 6-year battle with cancer that preceded King's death adds layers of meaning to the film's exploration of control, vulnerability, and the ways people cope with forces beyond their ability to manage. Victoria's gradual loss of autonomy mirrors the experience of serious illness, where individuals find their choices increasingly limited by circumstances they cannot control. The film's ultimate emphasis on recovery and reclaimed agency takes on additional significance when viewed as the work of someone fighting his own battle for control over his life and legacy. King's collaboration with his longtime partner, Patricia Louisiana Knopp, on the screenplay reflects their decades of creative partnership in exploring erotic themes with artistic seriousness. Their relationship, both personal and professional, provided the foundation for King's understanding of female psychology that makes Victoria's character arc feel authentic rather than exploitative. The couple's shared commitment to treating sexuality as a legitimate subject for serious artistic exploration shaped every aspect of the film's approach to its intimate material. The film's posthumous completion and release represents a collaborative effort to honor King's artistic vision while completing a work that he was unable to personally finish. The careful attention to post-production details reflects the respect that King's collaborators felt for his final artistic statement. The decision to maintain his original artistic vision. Rather than compromise it for. The international premiere of the film under the title Kamikaze Love at various film festivals reflects the global recognition of King's artistic contribution to cinema. The film's reception in international markets validates King's belief that stories about psychological complexity and sexual politics transcend cultural boundaries. The changing titles across different markets demonstrate the ongoing challenge of marketing serious erotic content. King's influence on the development of premium cable erotic programming through series like Red Shoe Diaries provides important context for understanding Pleasure or Pain as potentially representing the end of an era in sophisticated adult entertainment. The evolution of digital distribution and changing consumer preferences for adult content makes King's approach to erotic filmmaking seem both timeless and historically specific. The film serves as a bridge between the era of theatrical erotic cinema and the contemporary landscape of streaming adult content. The technical challenges of completing a film after the death of its director required careful collaboration between King's regular collaborators and post-production specialists who understood his artistic vision. The editing process, which King typically handled personally, required interpreting his notes and understanding his. The final cut represents both King's artistic vision and the collective interpretation of his collaborators who worked to honor his memory through faithful completion of his final project. The casting of adult film performers alongside traditional dramatic actors creates unique dynamics that reflect King's career-long interest in blurring the boundaries between different forms of entertainment. The integration of performers from different professional backgrounds required careful direction to ensure consistent dramatic tone while respecting the specific skills that each actor brought to their role. This casting approach adds meta-textual layers to the film's exploration of performance, authenticity, and the relationships between different forms of sexual expression. The film's exploration of wealth and power in Southern California reflects King's longtime fascination with the region's unique combination of natural beauty and artificial enhancement. The locations chosen for the film represent different aspects of California mythology, from the accessible dreams of Santa Monica to the exclusive realities of Malibu. The production design takes advantage of these locations to create environments that feel both seductive and ultimately hollow, beautiful, and somehow threatening. The psychological authenticity of Victoria's manipulation reflects King's sophisticated understanding of how intelligent people can find themselves in dangerous situations through gradual boundary violations rather than dramatic coercion. The script's careful attention to the incremental nature of psychological control demonstrates King's awareness that effective manipulation operates through subtle influence rather than obvious force. This understanding makes the film more disturbing than simple exploitation cinema because it acknowledges the reality of how psychological abuse actually operates. The film's technical production values reflect King's commitment to visual beauty as an essential element of effective erotic cinema. The cinematography creates environments that feel luxurious and appealing while gradually revealing. This visual evolution mirrors Victoria's psychological journey from attraction to recognition to escape, providing nonverbal narrative support for the dramatic themes. The international distribution of the film under various titles reflects the ongoing challenge of marketing serious erotic content to diverse global audiences with different cultural attitudes toward sexuality. The success of King's previous films in international markets provided precedent for global distribution, but the particular themes of pleasure or pain required careful consideration of cultural sensitivities. The film's ability to find audiences across different cultural contexts validates its exploration of universal themes despite its specific American setting. The collaboration between experienced film industry professionals and performers from the adult entertainment industry creates unique creative dynamics that add authenticity to the film's exploration of sexuality and power. The comfort level of adult performers with intimate content allows for more authentic portrayal of sexual manipulation, while their acting challenges require careful direction to integrate their performances with the overall dramatic vision. This collaboration demonstrates King's belief that effective erotic cinema requires authentic sexual content integrated with serious dramatic development. The film's production during the final years of King's life represents both the culmination of his artistic development and his awareness that he was creating a final statement about themes that had occupied his entire career. The urgency created by his illness adds intensity to every creative decision, making the film feel like both entertainment and artistic testimony. The careful attention to psychological detail reflects King's desire to create a work that would represent his mature understanding of the subjects he had explored throughout his filmmaking career. The supporting characters in pleasure or pain function as crucial psychological anchors that provide context for Victoria's transformation and highlight the systematic nature of Jack's manipulative behavior. Elle Alexandra's portrayal of Rita represents perhaps the most chilling element of the film's psychological landscape, serving as a living example of what Victoria could become if she remains trapped in Jack's orbit. Rita's character demonstrates the long-term consequences of psychological manipulation, showing how someone who was once probably similar to Victoria has been fundamentally altered by prolonged exposure to Jack's control. Alexandra brings remarkable depth to Rita despite her relatively limited screen time, creating a character who maintains surface sophistication while revealing underlying psychological damage through subtle performance choices. Her subsequent work in horror cinema, including her role as Mama in the segment Sick Little Boy in Blaze of Glory, demonstrates the actress's ability to portray characters who exist in extreme psychology. This range makes her portrayal of Rita particularly effective, as she can convey both the allure of Jack's world and the hidden costs of inhabiting it for extended periods. Rita's function within the narrative extends beyond simple warning to Victoria, serving as a mirror that reflects different aspects of Jack's methodology and its ultimate effects on his victim. Through Rita's interactions with both Victoria and Jack, viewers glimpse the systematic nature of Jack's manipulation, understanding that Victoria's experience represents not an isolated incident, but part of an ongoing pattern of behavior. Rita's damaged sophistication demonstrates how Jack's influence operates not through crude domination, but through subtle psychological reconstruction that leaves his victims technically functional but fundamentally altered. The character of Rita also provides important insight into the social networks that enable psychological manipulation to continue unchecked. Her apparent complicity in Jack's recruitment of Victoria reveals how victims of manipulation can become unwilling participants in perpetuating the cycle of abuse. This dynamic adds complexity to the film's moral landscape, showing how the boundaries between victim and enabler can become blurred when someone has been systematic. Daniel Sobiere's Antonio represents the practical infrastructure that allows Jack's lifestyle and manipulation to function smoothly. As Jack's associate and facilitator, Antonio embodies the network of people who benefit from maintaining the status quo, and therefore have vested interests in ensuring Jack's continued access to vulnerable women. Sobiere brings to Antonio a combination of professional competence and moral flexibility that makes him both useful to Jack and ultimately unsympathetic to audiences who recognize his complicity in psychological abuse. Antonio's character demonstrates how manipulation operates through institutional support rather than individual action alone. His role in arranging logistics, managing communications, and facilitating Jack's various scenarios shows how psychological abuse requires systematic support from people who understand their roles in the larger operation. This institutional aspect of manipulation makes it more difficult for victims to escape, as they must contend not only with their primary abuser, but with an entire network of people whose interests align with maintaining the abusive dynamic. The relationship between Antonio and Jack reveals important information about how manipulative individuals maintain their operations over time. Antonio's loyalty appears based primarily on financial and social benefits, rather than genuine personal affection or respect, suggesting that Jack's relationships generally serve instrumental rather than emotional purposes. This dynamic provides insight into Jack's psychology, showing how his inability to form authentic emotional connections extends to his professional and personal relationships beyond his romantic targets. Kayla Jane's Isabel serves as Victoria's connection to her authentic self and her life before Jack's influence. As Victoria's friend from her previous existence, Isabel represents the values, relationships, and identity that Victoria gradually abandons as she becomes more deeply involved in Jack's world. Jane's performance captures the frustration and concern of someone watching a friend disappear into a relationship that appears increasingly dangerous and destructive. Isabel's character development throughout the film reflects the broader social impact of psychological manipulation, showing how abusive relationships affect not only the primary victims, but also their support networks. Her attempts to maintain connection with Victoria become increasingly difficult as Victoria's priorities shift toward pleasing Jack and maintaining her position in his world. This dynamic illustrates how manipulation operates through isolation, making victims increasingly dependent on their abusers by systematically undermining their other relationships. The evolution of Isabel's relationship with Victoria provides important insight into the recovery process and the challenges of rebuilding authentic connections after escaping psychological manipulation. Isabel's willingness to remain available to Victoria, despite the strain that Jack's influence places on their friendship, demonstrates the kind of unconditional support that makes recovery possible. Her character serves as evidence that genuine relationships based on mutual respect and care can survive the temporary disruptions caused by psychological abuse. Jane's background in adult entertainment, like several other cast members, adds interesting layers. Her professional experience with boundary setting and consent negotiation in explicit content creation provides her with understanding of healthy sexual dynamics that informs her character's concern about Victoria's situation. This professional background allows Jane to portray Isabel as someone who recognizes the difference between consensual exploration. The casting choices throughout pleasure or pain reflect the integration of performers from mainstream cinema, adult entertainment, and theater creates a unique ensemble that brings varied perspectives to the film's exploration of sexuality, power, and authenticity. This casting approach adds authenticity to the film's examination of these themes, while challenging conventional assumptions about the relationships between different forms of entertainment. The supporting cast's collective contribution to the film extends beyond individual character development to create a comprehensive portrait of the social environment that enables psychological manipulation. Each character represents a different aspect of the system that allows Jack to operate with impunity, from Rita's damaged complicity to Antonio's professional facilitation to Isabel. This systematic approach to character development reinforces the film's central message that psychological abuse requires social conditions that enable it to flourish. The minor characters throughout the film, including Hayden Hawkins as Eve, Aubrey Adams as Adelaide, and Stephanie Danielson as Trish, create additional texture for the world Jack inhabits. These characters suggest the extent of Jack's influence and the number of women who have been affected by his manipulation over time. Their brief appearances provide glimpses into the broader pattern of behavior that makes Victoria's experience part of a larger systematic operation rather than an isolated incident. The film's exploration of the service industry that caters to wealth and power, represented through characters like Bryce Bond's waiter at hotel, reveals how economic inequality enables psychological manipulation. The deference and discretion that Jack receives from service personnel creates an artificial environment where his behavior appears normal and acceptable. This institutional support for Jack's lifestyle makes it more difficult for his victims to recognize the abnormal and dangerous aspects of their situations. The presence of characters like Franklin Rule's preacher and Toledo Diamond's MC at Club suggests the broader cultural context within which Jack operates. Their inclusion in the film's landscape creates a more comprehensive portrait of the social environment that enables manipulation and makes recovery more challenging for victims. The film's attention to casting details, including the use of professional names versus stage names for different performers, reflects King's understanding of the complex relationship between performance and authenticity that runs throughout the narrative. The decision to credit some performers under their professional adult industry names, while others appear under different credits, creates subtle commentary on the various forms of performance and authenticity that the film examines. The ensemble's collective performance creates a believable world where psychological manipulation can flourish, while remaining largely invisible to outside observers. The naturalistic interactions between characters from different backgrounds, and with different levels of complicity in Jack's operation, create authentic social dynamics that support the film's psychological realism. This attention to ensemble work demonstrates King's understanding that effective manipulation requires the cooperation, or at least the passive acceptance, of numerous individuals beyond the primary abuser and victim. The supporting characters' various responses to Victoria's situation, from Rita's damaged acceptance to Isabel's concerned resistance to Antonio's professional facilitation, provide a spectrum of possible reactions to psychological manipulation. This range of responses helps viewers understand how different people might react to witnessing manipulation, providing insight into why such abuse can continue. The realistic portrayal of these varied responses adds to the film's educational value regarding the social dynamics of psychological abuse. The film's exploration of economic class through its supporting characters reveals how financial inequality creates vulnerabilities that enable psychological manipulation. The contrast between Jack's wealthy associates and Victoria's working class background illustrates how economic desperation can make surmise. This class analysis adds sociological depth to the film's psychological insights, showing how individual psychological vulnerabilities intersect with broader social conditions. The supporting cast's contribution to the film's visual and thematic coherence demonstrates King's ability to create unified artistic vision through careful attention to every element of the production. Each character's costume, dialogue, and behavior contributes to the overall effect of seductive beauty, concealing underlying danger that characterizes Jack's world. This systematic attention to detail creates immersive experience that supports the film's serious artistic and educational objectives while maintaining commercial appeal. The critical reception of Pleasure or Pain reflects the ongoing challenges faced by erotic cinema in achieving recognition as legitimate artistic expression rather than simple commercial exploitation. Reviews demonstrate the persistent tension between viewing King's work as sophisticated psychological drama versus dismissing it as elevated pornography designed primarily for titillation. User reviews on platforms like IMDb reveal audiences struggling to evaluate a film that combines explicit sexual content with genuine attempts at character development and psychological insight. The dismissive critical response, exemplified by reviews describing the film as having production values of softcore pornography, while acknowledging passable technical quality, demonstrates the difficulty erotic cinema faces in receiving serious critical consideration. Critics often focus exclusively on the explicit content while ignoring the film's exploration of psychological manipulation, economic inequality, and recovery from a bust. This critical blind spot reflects broader cultural discomfort with sexuality as a legitimate subject for serious artistic exploration. More thoughtful critical analysis, such as Joe Greenwood's Letterboxd review, recognizes pleasure or pain as a culmination of King's career-long artistic interests and identifies specific techniques that distinguish his approach from simple exploitation. Greenwood's observation about the film's bored tone and faded beauty, creating unexpected charm, demonstrates sophisticated understanding of King's stylistic choices and their thematic relevance. His comparison of the film's ending to Francis Ford Coppola's Megalopolis suggests recognition of King as a serious filmmaker whose work deserves consideration alongside established auteurs. The emotional impact of the film's conclusion, where Malena Morgan breaks the fourth wall to address viewers directly before the tribute to King appears, provides evidence of the filmmaker's serious intentions despite the exploitation context. This technique transforms what could have been simple entertainment into a form of education and possibly activism, using the conventions of erotic thriller to deliver messages about the unexpected emotional power of this ending suggests successful integration of commercial and artistic objectives that characterizes King's best work. King's legacy as creator of Red Shoe Diaries demonstrates his pioneering role in bringing sophisticated erotic content to premium cable television during the early 1990s. The success of Red Shoe Diaries on Showtime, despite critical dismissal of King's theatrical films, proved the existence of substantial audience appetite for intelligent erotic entertainment. This television success provided King with creative freedom and financial resources that enabled him to pursue increasingly ambitious projects like Pleasure or Pain without compromising his artistic vision for commercial consideration. The international success of King's films, with Wild Orchid earning over $60 million worldwide, despite only $13 million domestic box office, demonstrates global appetite for sophisticated erotic cinema. This international recognition validated King's belief that stories about psychological complexity and sexual politics transcend cultural boundaries and deserves artistic consideration. The contrast between American and European reception of King's work reflects different cultural attitudes towards sexuality and suggests that American critical dismissal may reflect cultural limitations rather than artistic deficiencies. The erotic thriller genre's historical development provides important context for understanding pleasure or pain's place within cinema history. The genre's emergence during the late 1980s and peak popularity during the early 1990s established conventions that King both utilized and subverted throughout his career. The subsequent decline of mainstream erotic thrillers by the late 1990s makes Pleasure or Pain significant as one of the last serious attempts to revitalize the genre through psychological sophistication, rather than simple escalation of explicit content. The definition of erotic thriller as combining romanticized erotic appeal with dangerous thriller narrative through a pleasure and danger principle directly applies to Pleasure or Pain's exploration of Victoria's seduction and manipulation. The film's careful balance between making Jack's world genuinely attractive and revealing its underlying dangers demonstrates sophisticated understanding of the genre's central dynamic. King's ability to maintain this balance throughout the film's runtime shows mastery of erotic thriller conventions developed over decades of working within the genre. The academic description of erotic thrillers as noirish stories of sexual intrigue incorporating criminality or duplicity as framework for softcore sex applies perfectly to Pleasure or Pain's structure. However, King's film elevates this basic formula through genuine psychological insight and authentic character development that distinguishes it from simple exploitation offerings. The film's success in using erotic thriller conventions to explore serious themes about manipulation and recovery demonstrates the genre's potential for artistic significance when handled by skilled filmmakers. The contemporary relegation of erotic thrillers to European art house cinema, women's television, and independent productions provides context for understanding pleasure or pain as potentially representing the end of an era in American erotic filmmaking. King's death, shortly after completing the film, symbolically marks the conclusion of the classic erotic thriller period that began with Fatal Attraction and Basic Instinct. The film serves as both culmination of King's artistic development and farewell to a genre that may never again achieve the mainstream success and critical attention it enjoyed during its peak years. The production of over 700 direct-to-video erotic thrillers between 1985 and 2005 demonstrates the commercial viability of the genre despite critical dismissal. Pleasure or pain's theatrical release and high production values distinguish it from this flood of cheaply made exploitation films. While maintaining the genre's essential appeal, the film's positioning between mainstream theatrical release and direct-to-video exploitation reflects King's unique ability to bridge commercial and artistic objectives throughout his career. The influence of film noir on erotic thriller development provides additional context for understanding King's visual and thematic choices in Pleasure or Pain. The film's use of California locations, sophisticated lighting, and morally ambiguous characters reflects noir influence filtered through King's distinctive aesthetic sensibility. The psychological complexity of Jack and Victoria's relationship demonstrates how erotic thrillers can explore the same themes of desire, power, and moral ambiguity that characterize classic film noir. King's collaboration with Patricia Louisiana Knopp on Red Shoe Diaries established the creative partnership that would culminate in Pleasure or Pain's sophisticated exploration of female psychology. Their shared commitment to creating erotic content that respected, rather than exploited, female sexuality provided foundation for the film's nuanced approach to Victoria's character development. The technical sophistication of King's Red Shoe Diaries productions, noted by critics for their polished direction and high-end production values, established precedent for the visual excellence of Pleasure or Pain. The comparison of Red Shoe Diaries episodes to fashion advertisements or high-end perfume commercials reflects King's understanding that erotic content requires sophisticated presentation to achieve artisticated. This aesthetic philosophy shapes every aspect of Pleasure or Pain's production design and cinematography. The casting of David Duchovny in Red Shoe Diaries demonstrates King's ability to attract serious dramatic talent to erotic projects, validating his reputation as filmmaker capable of creating legitimate artistic works within exploitation context. Duchovny's subsequent mainstream success suggests that association with King's projects did not damage serious actors' careers, providing evidence of the respect King commanded within the film industry. This professional credibility enabled King to assemble the high-quality cast and crew that makes Pleasure or Pain technically and artistically superior to typical exploitation offerings. The international distribution and translation of King's work under various titles reflects global recognition of his distinctive artistic vision and commercial appeal. The decision to market Pleasure or Pain under different titles in different markets demonstrates sophisticated understanding of cultural variations in attitudes toward erotic content. This international success provides evidence of universal themes in King's work. The film's exploration of contemporary American themes through the lens of erotic thriller conventions provides commentary on broader social issues including economic inequality, gender dynamics, and the commodification of personal relationships. Victoria's attraction to Jack's lifestyle reflects cultural messages about success and happiness that make economic manipulation particularly effective. The film's critique of these cultural values operates through dramatic demonstration rather than explicit political commentary, making its social criticism more effective and accessible. The posthumous release of Pleasure or Pain adds poignancy to every creative decision, while raising questions about how King's final artistic statement might have differed had he lived to complete post-production personally. The collaborative effort required to finish the film according to King's vision demonstrates the loyalty and respect he inspired among his creative collaborators. The final product represents both King's individual artistic vision and collective tribute from colleagues who worked to ensure his legacy would conclude with a work worthy of his career achievements. The distribution strategy for Pleasure or Pain demonstrates the challenges faced by sophisticated erotic cinema in reaching appropriate audiences through traditional theatrical and home video channels. The film's initial release in South Korea on September 5, 2013, followed by staggered international releases through 2015, reflects the complex logistics of marketing adult-oriented content across different. The decision to premiere the film internationally before domestic release suggests recognition that foreign markets might be more receptive to King's artistic vision than American audiences accustomed to dismissing erotic content. The domestic television premiere on April 5, 2014, nearly 8 months after the initial South Korean release, indicates the difficulty of securing appropriate broadcast slots for adult-oriented dramatic content. The extended delay between international theatrical release and American television broadcast reflects ongoing cultural tensions about the place of sophisticated erotic content in mainstream American entertainment. This distribution timeline demonstrates how cultural attitudes towards sexuality can affect the commercial viability of serious artistic works that address adult themes with intelligence and nuance. The variety of international titles under which the film was released, including Todos os Tons do Prazer in Brazil and in Bulgaria, reflects the need to adapt marketing strategies to different cultural contexts and language considerations. The retention of the original English title in most English-speaking markets demonstrates confidence in the film's ability to find audiences despite its controversial subject matter. The contemporary streaming availability of Pleasure or Pain on platforms including Apple TV, Fandango at Home, and Prime Video reflects the evolution of distribution strategies for adult-oriented content in the digital age. The film's presence on legitimate streaming platforms rather than exclusively adult-oriented sites validates its status as serious dramatic entertainment rather than simple exploitation material. This mainstream streaming availability provides access for viewers interested in King's artistic vision while avoiding the stigma associated with specialized adult content platforms. The technical specifications of the film, including its 99-minute runtime, color presentation, Dolby IR sound mix, and standard theatrical aspect ratio of 1.85:1, demonstrate professional production standards that distinguish it from low-budget exploitation offerings. These technical elements support the film's artistic ambitions while meeting commercial distribution requirements for theatrical and home video release. The careful attention to technical quality reflects King's understanding that sophisticated, erotic content requires professional presentation to achieve artistic credibility. The production companies involved in Pleasure or Pain, including Last Night Productions, the Zalman King Company, and Visual Arts Entertainment. This combination of production backing provides the financial resources necessary for high production values, while maintaining the specialized knowledge required for effective erotic cinema distribution. The partnership between different types of production companies reflects the film's ambition to bridge commercial and artistic objectives throughout its development and release. The film's production in California during 2011 required navigating the complex permit processes that regulate filming in the state's desirable. The requirement for state film permits to be submitted at least 4 business days in advance, with additional lead times for highway closures and drone usage, demonstrates the logistical complexity involved in securing California's most photogenic locations. The production team's success in obtaining permits for Malibu, Santa Monica, and Westlake Village locations reflects professional competence in managing these regulatory requirements. California's film-friendly policies, including streamlined permit processes and regional film commissions dedicated to supporting production activity, provided essential infrastructure for Pleasure or Pain's ambitious location shooting. The state's recognition of film production as important economic activity creates institutional support that makes sophisticated location shooting financially viable for mid-budget production. This governmental support enables filmmakers like King to create visually stunning works that take full advantage of California's natural beauty and architectural sophistication. The psychological manipulation themes explored in Pleasure or Pain place the film within a broader cinematic tradition that includes acknowledged classics of the psychological thriller genre. Films like Shutter Island, Primal Fear, and Fight Club demonstrate the continuing audience appetite for stories that examine how individuals can be systematically deceived and controlled through sophisticated psychological techniques. King's contribution to this tradition distinguishes itself through its specific focus on romantic and sexual manipulation, rather than the broader psychological. The academic recognition of psychological manipulation as a legitimate cinematic theme, evidenced by film studies programs and critical analyses that examine these dynamics, provides context for understanding pleasure or pain as part of serious artistic discourse rather than simple commercial exploitation. The identification of specific manipulation techniques and their cinematic representation. This academic framework validates King's artistic choices while providing analytical tools for understanding the film's psychological sophistication. The continued popularity of manipulation-themed cinema, evidenced by regular inclusion of such films in best-of lists and critical retrospectives, demonstrates enduring audience fascination with these psychological dynamics. The recognition that manipulation stories provide both entertainment value and educational insight into human psychology suggests that King's final film addresses themes of permanent rather than temporary cultural relevance. This lasting appeal validates the artistic merit of exploring these difficult subjects through dramatic entertainment. The classification of pleasure or pain within the broader psychological thriller genre provides important context for understanding. The genre's emphasis on mental states rather than external action aligns perfectly with King's focus on Victoria's internal experience throughout her manipulation and recovery. This genre classification helps explain why the film requires more sophisticated critical analysis than simple exploitation cinema, while maintaining commercial appeal through its thriller elements. The film's exploration of power dynamics through romantic relationships connects it to broader cultural discussions about consent, agency, and the ways that economic and social inequality can create vulnerabilities that enable psychological manipulation. The academic recognition of these themes as legitimate subjects for psychological analysis validates King's artistic choices while providing theoretical framework for understanding. This scholarly context distinguishes the film from simple exploitation while acknowledging its entertainment value. The DVD and digital distribution of pleasure or pain through mainstream retail channels demonstrates the film's acceptance as legitimate entertainment rather than specialized adult content. The availability of the film through standard consumer electronics retailers and digital platforms reflects confidence in its artistic merit and broad commercial. This mainstream distribution strategy validates King's belief that sophisticated erotic content could find audiences beyond the specialized markets that typically consume such material. The film's technical presentation on DVD and digital platforms, including standard consumer-friendly formats and mainstream marketing approaches, reflects careful attention to reaching appropriate audiences without the stigma often associated with adult-oriented content. The decision to market the film as dramatic entertainment rather than specialized erotic content demonstrates confidence in its artistic merit and universal themes. This marketing strategy acknowledges the film's explicit content while emphasizing its psychological sophistication and character development. The successful translation and distribution of the film across different languages and cultural frameworks suggests that the psychological dynamics it explores transcend national boundaries and cultural differences. This international recognition provides evidence for the film's artistic merit while validating King's belief that sophisticated erotic content could achieve global commercial success.